So I wanted to discuss this new album from Tribulation because this was definitely up there on my most anticipated albums for January. If you don't know Tribulation, they're a heavy metal band. They combine elements of some death metal, some thrash metal. It's definitely easier to listen to than a lot of the more aggressive death metal bands. They're labeled black metal a lot, and I guess they do have some influences there, but it's pretty minor in comparison to their death metal influences, in my opinion. I think the black metal label gets thrown around because they try to build such a spooky atmosphere. Like, it comes off super occult, kind of like a band like Ghost, except this band happens to be a little bit heavier than Ghost. But still, it's the same general idea, I guess, in terms of what they're trying to build in a vibe. It's a very theatrical, very over-the-top, very occult, very spooky vibe. So yeah, going into this album, I was anticipating that it would actually be pretty good. But what happens here is that Tribulation is kind of just putting out more of the same. It's almost as if they found the formula with their last few records and they've just been rolling with it. They really are a pretty one-dimensional band, and it really shows up on this album. And the worst part is, this was the same mistake they made with their last album, and they just did it again here. It's almost as if they're just cranking out the same thing over and over again. And that's not to say there aren't some really nice songs here. You're getting some really pummeling drums, some very eerie melodies that I love. The guitar melodies are so catchy. I like them a lot, especially like on the song The Lament. The freaking guitar melodies on that song are incredible. I love them. And the vocals are this sort of, I guess I would call it a black metal growl. They aren't as low as some death metal Cookie Monster gutturals get, but they're definitely a growl. They're not a shriek. They're not anything too high pitch, and they stay around there for the entire album. Not only that, but the songs themselves, in terms of structuring and just what happens, for the most part stays around the same. There are a couple songs where they mix up the formula a little bit, but for the most part, it's you get an intro, then it gets into this super driving instrumental, and the growling vocals enter. Occasionally, they do work in some nice piano, some nice strings. One of the songs actually reminds me a lot of freaking Square Hammer by Ghost, just because the way the lead then enters into the guitar, which just sounds so Square Hammer. Like, it was almost, they said, oh, I like that, let's make our own version of it. And that's what I do appreciate about that track, is that it is its own version of it. It's not so similar that it hurts the song. It just sounds like a nod more so than anything else. Looking at this album as a whole, though, the biggest issue is that every song sounds the same. You know, there might be some really great tracks here, there might be a lot of good ideas here, but Tribulation takes zero risks on this album, and when you're listening to it from front to back, it kind of starts to get old. I do like that this is one of their shorter records, but even then, I really wish they switched it up a little bit just to stop this from getting stale. And like I said before, this is pretty similar to their last record, which is cool. I like a band that has an identity, but when you're just cranking out the same thing over and over again, me personally, I just don't get very interested in that. And that's kind of what we're getting here. Not to mention, I do think the vocals, for the most part, they're solid. I'm not really blown away by them. I kind of wish there was more happening there. At least in a lot of black metal bands that only have one style of vocal, I feel like they're generally pushed to the background. They're generally hidden in the atmosphere. With this band, however, the vocals are in the forefront, which is part of the appeal of a band like this, because you can actually understand what they're saying. But when the vocals are so one-dimensional and they're in the forefront, they just get just tired, really old, really freaking quick. And that's kind of what happened here. Any other complaints I have about this album are just minor. It's like I said, I like the formula. I like what they have. I just wish they weren't phoning it in and just cranking it out the way they do. I wish there was a couple songs where maybe they had an instrumental interlude that was really spooky or really creepy. similar to Ghost. Yet again, maybe have a couple songs where you go a more ballad approach. Maybe have a couple songs where you take a more aggressive approach. They don't really do that here. Every song has the same formula, and yeah, at this point I guess I'm just repeating myself. It's a 68 out of 100.